So what is lean? Well, lean is actually process excellence. Do we have the best possible processes in place that we can have right at this moment in time? It's got nothing to do with downsizing or any of that other nonsense that you may have heard about, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. It's all about, do we have the best possible, the most effective processes in place right now? And by the way, do our customers believe that we have the best processes in place? So Lean for Government itself is a process, it's a philosophy, it's a way of doing business. What it absolutely is not is a project. We do projects, but Lean itself is not a project. It has a start date, but there is no finish date. This I promise you. Nobody in this room will ever live long enough to run out of things to work on. It simply won't happen. And in fact, the more you do, the more opportunity you tend to see. And it's designed to bring about what we call rapid, planned, controlled, and measured step change improvements to the performance of an organization through an overhaul of what we call the value stream. So let's talk about a couple of those real quick. When we talk about step change improvements, this is radical change. And that radical change is brought about by a series of small improvements that are compounded over time. Does that make sense to everybody? These are small improvements compounded over time. That's what brings about that radical change. Is the $1 million cost reduction idea out there? Well, it might be. You've probably found it already if it is. So we're looking at much smaller improvements that we can make that bring about that radical change. The value stream for right now is everything that happens in the organization wall to wall. There is no department, there is no function that cannot benefit from the kinds of things we're talking about in this room. And it uses what we call a comprehensive set of elements, rules, and tools that focus on customer value, the elimination of waste, and continuous incremental improvements. Let's talk about a couple of those real quick. Customer value. The question you have to ask yourself consistently is this: if the customer, our residents, our citizens, could see me performing the step that I'm performing right now, would they be willing to pay me what they pay me for the product or service that I provide? And in reality, folks, the answer in most cases is no, they would not. They don't care about most of the stuff we do. We care about it. They don't care about it. They just want the product. They want the service. The elimination of waste, we'll talk about that here momentarily in some detail. And then continuous incremental improvement. And the question you have to ask yourself there is, am I better today than I was yesterday, even by a little bit, and can I show that? Can I actually demonstrate that we've done that? How many people do we have working at the city approximately?
Approximately 150.
150 people. Think about this for a second. Think about what this organization would look like in 12 months, 1 year from now, if every one of our 150 people made one minor improvement in what they do every single day. That's 150 improvements a day for 220 odd days a year. What do you think we'd look like in just 12 months? Do you think you have one minor improvement in you every day? And if you don't have one every day, do you at least have one a week? Imagine what we could do with just that mindset, okay, in terms of improving the way things are done. I'm assuming, like all the other cities that are out there, you're under all kinds of pressure. All I hear about in government all the time is our people are stressed out. We can't keep up with the work that we have to get done. We're days behind. People are under pressure, and so on and so forth. Imagine if we could start to make some inroads into that, allow people to get their jobs done in a timely manner. The most important thing to remember, however, is that Lean is a thinking process. It's all about how we think about how we do our jobs every single day. You know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've actually been doing it for over 17 years. And 17 years down the road, I still find myself having to sort of slap myself on the side of the head and say, you know what, you're not thinking about this work the way that you should. So I've got three little quotations that I've got on my computer that I use to remind myself of how I should be thinking every single day. And they go something like this. The first one says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. It's kind of deep for 8 o'clock in the morning, isn't it? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. The moment you are prepared to look at something from a different perspective, a world of opportunity opens up we never saw before. By the way, it was always there. We just simply didn't see it until now. When we do these events, when we do these projects, and as we undertake the kinds of things we're talking about in this room, there is no money. Okay, we don't have thousands of dollars to throw at this stuff. We're asking people to get together and solve a problem with the resources we already have. Okay, so if that's true, and by the way, it is true, and you see the kinds of improvements that people make, then you got to ask yourself, well, then how is that possible if we're not going to throw more resource at it and we're not going to throw more money at it? Well, they achieve those improvements by looking at things from a different perspective. The solutions to the problems are already there. We just haven't found them yet. The second quotation is the title of a book. It's not the book itself, it's just the title. And the title of that book is that Sacred Cows Make the Best Hamburgers. How many sacred cows do you think you have in your organization today? How many people create little systems to CYA, to protect themselves? I have my own way of doing it. It's okay for you to go work on Frank's stuff because he obviously needs the help, but I don't need it. Okay, so what happens is we create these little systems and then we guard them, okay, and then what happens is we build up these very difficult ways to get things done, and a lot of bureaucracy tends to build up around it. And then the third quotation, which is on my website, which is on my business cards, which is my business philosophy, and whether I live up to this or not is not the issue. I do try, and it goes like this. It says, it's never crowded along the extra mile. For you as an individual or you as an organization, when you're on that extra mile, you're going to be there by yourself or with a very small number of other people. You see, there's not that many people on the extra mile. There's not that many people on, that many organizations on the extra mile. Why would anybody want to choose to live in Hudson? Okay, what is it that you offer that nobody else does? And the way we generate revenue is by attracting residents, by attracting businesses. Are we absolutely the best at what we do? Okay, why would somebody not want to live in Stowe or Cuyahoga Falls or Macedonia as opposed to Hudson? Because we're better at it than anybody else. And if you don't believe that that's an important issue, talk to people like Frank. When businesses are looking at locating in a city, okay, they're interested in the service and how quickly it's provided and how reliable it is and so on and so forth. So being on that extra mile is really important. When your customer has finished their contact with you, what is their, and by the way, that contact can be by phone, it can be by email, it can be in person. What is their response? Is it wow or is it ow? And if it's not wow, why isn't it? What is it that we need to do to make those people believe that they're getting value for the money that they're paying every single month, every single year? So a perfect process creates precisely the right value for the customer. In that perfect process, every step is valuable, capable, available, adequate, and flexible. Creates value for the customer, produces a good result every single time, produces the desired output, not just the quality we need every single time. It's adequate, it doesn't cause delay, and it's flexible and linked by continuous flow. So failure in any one of those dimensions produces some kind of waste. So Lean is actually there to help you achieve the vision for your organization. Okay, it supports the strategy that you have that evolves from that vision. It's not a strategy all by itself. It's simply there to help you achieve what it is that you need to achieve over the coming years at the City of Hudson. So what are the benefits? Why would we do this? Obviously, we're not going to do it unless there's significant benefits to be derived from it. So this is a little busy, this slide here, but you can see here that by the way, this was a study that was done by Industry Week magazine of more than 300 organizations who had been doing Lean for more than 3 years. And you can see here under the headings of production, quality, facilities, materials, business management, and customer, improvements anywhere from 5% up to and above 100%. And here's how you translate that. Okay, direct labor productivity improvements of 45 to 75%, costs reduced 25 to 55%, flow increases 60 to 90% and so on. You can look at the rest of that for yourself. These are pretty significant increases. In fact, you look at that slide and you say to yourself, well, how could anybody possibly get those kinds of improvements? Or if they can get those kinds of improvements, they're obviously not very good at what they do in the first place. Well, that's not actually true. As I said to you earlier on, only good organizations even undertake the kinds of things we're talking about in this room. Well, then if that's true, then how do they get these kinds of improvements? By looking at things from a different perspective. These are pretty significant. Imagine if all you could do in each one of those categories was get 5%. Just that. Imagine the improvement that that would make. So there's all kinds of opportunity out there. But let's take a look at the benefits from a slightly different perspective under the headings that you see on this screen right here. The first one of these is service level improvement. So service levels are increased by providing what the customers want when the customers want it. We reduce the lead time for performing the services, and we respond at the rate required by our customers. Now, what does all of that mean? It means that we give the customer what the customer wants when the customer wants it, not when we want to provide it. It sounds fairly straightforward, doesn't it? It sounds like it should be a fairly simple thing to do, and yet we tend to struggle with that all the time. Do you find that the residents have become more demanding? I don't want to wait. Don't talk to me about 20 days or 15 days or 5 days. How about I get it right now? And that by the way, that demand is just going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. People want an immediate response. Rework is minimized by operating what we call one-piece flow or one-need flow. What does that mean? It means that traditionally we've been taught that the most efficient way to do anything is to do it in batches. Get a batch together and then do them all at the one time. In reality, the most efficient way to do anything is to do one at a time. What's the problem with a batch? Well, the problem with the batch is that we have people downstream in the process waiting for work, while we have people upstream in the process perhaps doing things that they don't need to do right now. If you don't believe that this is true, try it when you go back to work. Try processing things one piece at a time. Now we keep everything flowing. Now we keep everybody supplied with what they need when they need it. That's the first sort of really strange concept in Lean. Cash generation. Okay, obviously we need cash. Okay, we need cash to run the city. Somebody does a really good job of managing cash, or we probably wouldn't be sitting in this room here today. And I presume, I don't know what your situation is, I presume we don't like the idea of having to borrow it, because guess what, the banks tend to charge us interest on it, and so on and so forth. So one of the ways that we generate cash is we significantly reduce the throughput time. The amount of time it takes between the start of the service and the finish of the service, okay? If we can take the waste out of that process and we can reduce the throughput time, then we can provide more of those services in the same time period with the same people. It allows us to catch up on the work that we're behind on, et cetera, et cetera. This is really important. And the waste that's in the process, by the way, removing that is painless. Nobody gets hurt in this process. We're simply doing things that the customer doesn't actually care about. We tend to have built them up over time here, but the customer doesn't care about most of this stuff. Less investment in capital equipment and automation, better utilization of our existing assets. You know, when we have to replace equipment, we have to replace trucks, et cetera, that costs a lot of money. Where does that money come from? Okay, it comes out of the budget, or we have to plan for it, or it's a capital investment of some kind. Sometimes we don't get new equipment, sometimes we get used equipment, and so on, depending on the financial situation that we're in at the time. If we can make that equipment work more efficiently and work longer, then it significantly reduces the amount of investment that we have to make in equipment and vehicles, et cetera. Less overtime, less rework, less downtime, less hiring. Lean frees up resource. I'll talk to you about that here again in a moment. Less inventories, less stocks of things sitting around. By the way, inventory is stuff that we have paid for that we're not using right now. We've paid for it way in advance of us ever actually using it. Some of it is just in case. And often we find ourselves in the situation where we have years' supply of one thing and we don't have any supply of something that we need on a continuous basis. Less indirect non-value added costs such as support, approvals, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that you typically see in most organizations, and this is not limited to government organizations in any way, is we have an awful lot of people involved in the process. Just send me this thing and I'll sign it and I'll pass it on to the next step, and somebody else will sign it and they'll pass it on to the next step, et cetera, et cetera. Why are there so many people involved in all of these processes? Well, typically we get people sign off on things because of a mistake that happened longer ago than anybody can actually remember. Our sort of thought process has been that I'll avoid that mistake from ever happening again if I just send it to somebody to be signed. Well, once the panic is over and once things have quietened down, the person who signs it probably doesn't even look at it. They simply sign it and pass it on. What's the value in that? All that does is slow down the process. And by the way, if you think that having somebody check it is the answer, how does that actually work for you? Is that working well? Because 100% inspection is about 80% effective. So what happens is we just simply delay the process, and we have an awful lot of people involved in that. How about we have a process that has only one step? Why does it have to go to all of these different places all the time for so many people to be involved? Asset utilization. Equipment availability is improved by effective maintenance and quick changeover programs. Do we have a lot of downtime on equipment? Do we do the maintenance? Do we have time to do the maintenance? Do we have the money to do the maintenance that we need? The worst condition a piece of equipment should ever be in is the condition it was in the day you got it. That's as bad as we ever let it get. Space is made available due to better flow and moving the processes close together. We have all kinds of buildings, we have all kinds of operations. A lot of travel goes on between those buildings all the time. Even within buildings, one step in the process is over here, another one's over here, another one's over here. So you see a lot of people moving around, a lot of paper being moved around the organization all the time. One of the things we try to do in Lean, and obviously there's a cost to this, so we do this slowly, but one of the things we try to do is to move the process steps as close to each other as we possibly can so we can keep things flowing. One step to the next with no delays. Quality improvement. Quality is improved by mistake proofing the process. One of the things we focus on in Lean is how do we make it impossible to make a mistake? You know, I ask people all the time, what would life be like if it were impossible to make a mistake? And somebody shouted out one time, boring. I'll take boring any day, thank you very much. That will do me just fine. Boring is good. So now imagine if we could get to that point where we can prevent mistakes from happening by mistake proofing the process. And if we can't do that, and you can't always do that, then the fallback position is I want to know immediately that the mistake has happened before it goes all the way downstream in the process, right, gathering cost as it goes. And this happens a lot, doesn't it? A mistake happens and we don't find it until the very end of the process, when in reality what we want to do is to find it when it happens in the process. And by the way, those mistakes tend to cost us a lot of money in terms of time and complication, dealing with irate customers, et cetera, et cetera. Design for ease of use helps to minimize errors and difficult processes. When was the last time that you sat down and you designed a procedure from scratch, from a clean sheet of paper? Or did this procedure start 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago? We've added this step and this review and this approval and this person's now involved. Can you please copy me on that? And we have all kinds of people involved in these processes, and the whole thing has just become incredibly complicated. If you were starting over, just think to yourself for a moment, if you were starting over with some of the processes that you have right now, would it look like it looks today? And if the answer to that is no, is there an opportunity there to improve that? You know, technology was supposed to help us. Do you remember that? All the headlines were the paperless office, we're all going to lose our jobs, et cetera, et cetera. We're generating 10 times more paper today than we ever did before we ever had a computer. 10 times more. By the way, why are we doing that? Because we can. Simply because we can. We facilitated this with printers and everything else. So our processes are just incredibly complicated. Why do they need to be like that? Why do things have to take forever? And they don't typically take forever. If you look at the work we do, they typically take forever because they sit and wait in places until somebody else is ready to get to it. Employee participation, this is the key. You're not going anywhere with this process called Lean unless we can find a way to involve the vast majority of people in the organization in this activity. You cannot impose this on anybody. If I'm your boss, maybe I can get you to do something, but I can't make you think anything. You do that for yourself, okay? So if we can get our employees involved in this process, there's nothing we can't tackle. And typically we've not done that, and I don't mean that to be any kind of criticism. We've had a habit over the years of telling people how to do their job. Well, most people don't know how to do your job, therefore how could they tell you how to do your job, right? And there's all kinds of opportunities. You see it every day. You're living with the frustrations of it every single day. And now there's an opportunity to actually do something about that if we create the right framework in which this can happen. Lean is absolutely led from the top of the organization, and it's built from the ground up, okay? Management doesn't do this. Management doesn't do the projects. Management doesn't do the improvements. Management creates the environment in which all of this can actually happen. And when you look at the people, when you get involved in these projects, and you see the staggering ideas that people have, you start to ask yourself, why didn't we do this before? Well, we can always say that about anything, can't we? Right? But you'll find that there's amazing ideas within your organization on how we can make some improvements. Satisfaction levels increase dramatically by participating in the organization's performance improvement. Do you care what happens to the city? Are you interested in the success of the organization? Hopefully the answer to that is yes. Based on what we see going on around us every single day, we make all kinds of serious decisions like buying a home, sending a kid to college, buying a car, and so on and so forth. So I presume we're all interested in the success of the organization. Workplace organization and visual management programs increase the sense of ownership. 5S or 6S for right now, simply workplace organization. A place for everything, and everything that's not needed is gone. And the pack rats, by the way, really hate this. There's like weeping and gnashing of teeth as you start to eliminate some of this junk that we've accumulated over the years. Recently in an organization, we found World War I memorabilia as we were tidying it up. Do you think it's been a while since they took a look at that? How much time do you spend looking for things every single day? People, documents, tools, paper, anything. How much time do you spend? If you think about it for a second, if you spend at least 10% of your day looking for stuff, and by the way, it's probably more like 50, right? Stuff on the network, etc. But if you spend at least 10% of your day every day looking for stuff, then if we have 150 people, we've got the equivalent of 15 people who spend all day every day looking for stuff. And of course it doesn't happen like that, does it? It happens in these 5 and 10-minute chunks, and we tend not to pay a lot of attention to it because it only takes a little while. Well, how many times a day does that happen? How much of your 8-hour day do you spend actually looking for anything at all, right? And the rule in Lean is that you need to be able to find what you're looking for in 10 seconds or less. 10 seconds. And if it's not 10 seconds, it's not organized well enough. And by the way, you'll find after a while, people really like this, the organization. It's really frustrating when you're trying to find something, isn't it? I remember one day, I was helping my son do some work in his house. It's what you call, when he gets his father to do it, it's what you call cheap labor. And by the way, unskilled labor at that. I remember we spent an entire Saturday there. And as I walked out of there, you'd think I'd know better. As I walked out of there at the end of that Saturday, I was thinking to myself, we didn't really get very much done today. I spent half the time looking for tools. And by the way, half the time the tools I needed were right there in plain sight. I couldn't see them. There was so much junk everywhere. This workplace organization is really important. There's huge opportunities in that. Visual management is about making the work visible, making it easier for us to do our jobs. Employees quickly establish the concept of value added, and they start to question everything that they do. And this is what we really do want to have happen, is we want people to start to question every step in every process every single day. So it's easy for me to say that standing here, and as an organization we got to ask ourselves, are we actually ready for that? Are we ready for that? Are we ready to respond to those questions? Because if we start this, then that's what's going to happen. People are going to start to suggest improvements. We've got to at least investigate those improvements to see if we can implement them. Productivity, single need flow typically improves the rate of completion and the level of quality. Work balancing and level loading, what that is that we try to balance out the work and level the load so that things flow smoothly from one step to the next. That eliminates unnecessary labor. Everything we need to do the work is at hand and travel time is eliminated. And then communications are improved by visual management systems. Less time is wasted through confusion. What do you think the cost of confusion is? Is our work confusing? Do we find it difficult to understand what it is we need to do, or when we need to do it, or where somebody's at, or what the next job is, et cetera, et cetera? And ask yourself, why does it need to be that way? Most people in the city know exactly what to do and when to get it done. And yet we have all of these things that get in the way of that happening. And then budget control, which is probably the only reason Frank asked me to be here, right? Again, we're under all kinds of pressure, financial pressure. And it's really important that we control the budget. So unnecessary material and labor is removed from the process. But we need to have a quick discussion about this. Lean is not, repeat, not a downsizing program. Who's going to come to you and say, here, let me help you make this better so you can get rid of me? That's not what this is all about at all, okay? I've never seen, in hundreds of examples, not once have I ever seen an organization successfully use Lean to downsize. That's not why we're in this room, but it does free up resource. Okay, so if we save some hours of somebody's time every day, okay, and that's what we'll be looking to do, that time needs to be put to value-added use. Okay, in other words, catch up on your backlog, or serve more customers, or do more of the same transaction in the same time period, et cetera, et cetera. And I can assure you, right, that a lot of people hate that change worse than the layoff change. Oh, my job is going to be different. Almost, if you do this, almost everybody's job will change in some way. Are we comfortable with that? And if we're not comfortable with that, we're going to have some issues, I guess, we're going to have to face. But you've seen what's happened over the last number of years, have you not? Okay, we've had to make a lot of changes, because of financial reasons. And that will just simply continue to happen with or without Lean. Less equipment replacement costs as the useful life is extended. Costs are reduced as the lead times for applications, taxes, permits, et cetera. The services that you offer are reduced, and then overall operating costs are reduced as the processes become more effective. There's a number of cities out there, and by the way, at the very back of your packet, we won't go through this today, you'll see some examples. I've left you some examples of some cities that are seeing some really staggering improvements by implementing this thing called Lean. The really important thing to understand is that nobody gets hurt in this process. This better serves our residents, our citizens, it better serves the employees, better serves management, etc. Nobody gets hurt in this process. It's relatively painless, except the change piece of it. So 10 guidelines for Lean, abandon fixed ideas. I'm not saying that the way we've always done it is wrong, but if we haven't looked at it recently, perhaps we should. Think of ways to make it possible. No excuses, find ways to make it happen. Find ways to make it happen. You know, there's a tendency to say, this won't work here. Or we've tried this before and it didn't work. And I would ask you to turn that around and say to yourself, how do I make it work? How would I apply this in the department that I'm in, or in the job that I'm in? How do I make it work? That's a much more interesting question. Strive to make it better, not necessarily best. Let me assure you that you're not going to find the perfect process. What we're looking for is continuous improvement. Okay, remember, am I better today than I was yesterday? And if it's better than what we had, let's take that, let's put it in our pocket. We'll come back to this again at some point in the future and try it one more time. Correct mistakes right away and then find the root cause. Do you see a lot of situations where the same thing keeps happening over and over, or something similar to it keeps happening over and over? And if that's the case, then we probably have not solved the root cause of that problem. It comes back in a slightly different disguise or whatever. Use your wits, not your wallet. Creativity before cash is the kind of subtitle of Lean. There isn't any money. We totally understand that there isn't any money. Okay, we have a hard enough time staying in budget as it is. But what we do have is the people in this room, okay, and all the ideas that the people in this room have, okay, and that creativity put to work produces staggering results. Problems are opportunities. They truly are. When somebody complains, when somebody's not happy about something, by the way, either internally or externally, that's an opportunity for us to do something different, hopefully something better. A lot of times we get frustrated with those complaints, etc., but they truly are opportunities to improve. Question continuously. Look at what you do every single day and question it continuously. Why am I doing it? Why am I doing it this way? Why am I doing it here? Why am I doing it now? And keep asking yourself constantly, is there a better way to get this done? And ask yourself this question constantly: why does this process have more than one step? Seek ideas from many people. I think we work so much better together than we do individually. None of us is as smart as all of us. When you put a team of people together, and by the way, we do that with Lean, we tend to get very good results. And then improvement never ends. Okay, we're going to be doing this until whenever. Okay, it just never ends. There's never a time when there isn't something that can be made better than it is right now. Never. So why should we do it? To eliminate waste, which, by the way, typically consumes somewhere between 30 and 40% of revenue. And that's a huge opportunity. And again, all I say to you is, imagine if you could just get 5% of that. Imagine the pressure that would relieve on the organization. But typically, it consumes somewhere between 30 and 40% of revenue. So waste is described as any activity or inactivity that absorbs resource but doesn't actually create any value. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but this thing called Lean evolved from something known as the Toyota Production System. And the Toyota Production System evolved from a set of concepts that management gurus like Deming and Juran tried to teach us in the 50s and 60s, and we weren't interested. And then they went and taught them to the Japanese. And then we said, oh, that's interesting. Why don't we do that? It's kind of interesting how all of that works, isn't it? So it started off in manufacturing. It's extended to healthcare. It's extended to service. It's extended to government. There's no operation out there. The ones that haven't yet started to look at that are the schools, but that's beginning to happen. So there are what we call the 8 types of waste. So let's run through those really quickly. The first one of these is overproducing, generating more information than the customer needs. How many pieces of paper do you think the city generates every year? Any idea? A lot, right? And typically we don't know the answer to that. But one organization did go off and find out the answer to that. It's a small hospital group in Akron. And they found that they generated 16 million sheets of paper a year. If this was my product, if this is what I did for a living, was to make something like this, this has 3 cost components in it. It's got material, it's got labor, it's got overhead in it. I would expect to sell this at the end of the day and make some money, right? That's how manufacturing works. If paper is my product, it has 3 cost components in it. It's got material, it's got labor, it's got overhead. I probably don't get anything for that. All I do is consume resource. Think about everybody who touches that piece of paper. How many reports do you think the city generates every week, every day, every week, every month? Who gets them? What did they do with them when they get them? They probably all do exactly the same thing. They either file them in this filing cabinet or in this filing cabinet right here. I got multiple people doing exactly the same thing with exactly the same documents, many of who probably don't need it in the first place. And by the way, if I were to go and ask you for that, you probably wouldn't even know you had it. How many emails do you get? How many of those are for you? Or do you have to open them up and read them to know you should never have gotten them in the first place? And we have people in the organization who really don't know how to write an email. They write an absolute diatribe. and you don't know what they want until the very last sentence. And we have people who copy everybody and their mother on every email. And we have people who respond to everybody and their mother on every email. And then they respond with one word like yes, and now I got to read the whole darn string again to know what yes means. I know a manager who will send you an email, and then he'll go put a copy on your desk in case you didn't get it. I know a lady who prints off a copy of every email she sends and every email she receives, and she files it away. But email's free, right? What do you think it costs to send an email? Well, we don't know what it costs to send an email. But even if you said it only costs 10 cents, and it costs way more than that. Now imagine how many hundreds of thousands of emails that we send in the city every year. Somebody's got to deal with it. And the more people you copy on it, guess what? The more people you involve. Most of them don't want to be involved in the first place. I had somebody tell me recently, 95% of the emails I get, I should never be copied on. Think about that. And now that we all have smartphones, well, you better take that with you to the bathroom when you go, because I might need you while you're in there. And it's now become like a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week job, has it not? How many meetings do you have? How many of those are actually scheduled for 7 minutes? Because that's about all the valid content there is in any meeting, except this one right here this morning. You do understand that, don't you? But they're not, are they? They're scheduled like from 9 to 10 or 2 to 3 or whatever that happens to be. And then what happens is people come, and by the way, you better not be sitting in their chair, because I'm sitting in my spot, I'm bringing my coffee, I'm bringing my pad, my pencil, and I'm staying till 3 o'clock because after all, this is supposed to go on till 3 o'clock. And nothing ever happens at those meetings. You ever notice that? We come back next week, and then we come back next week, and we come back the next week, and so on and so forth, and nothing ever seems to get done. And again, we involve all kinds of, there's people at those meetings who shouldn't be there. There's people who are not there who should be there. Some people come late, some people don't come at all. Some people don't do what they were supposed to do. But meetings are how we communicate. Okay? So how about this? How about we have conference rooms that have no chairs? All meetings are stand-up. I promise you, you won't have to time them. They will be done in 10 minutes. Nobody wants to stand at a meeting. And by the way, they're incredibly productive. You get done exactly what you need to get done in that very short time frame, and then we're off. How many of you actually love meetings? I mean, I don't know about you, but I hate them. I absolutely hate them. And I hate them especially when nothing's happening in it. And how about this one? You got a minute? Thank God you stopped by. I was bored out of my mind. Do you know it takes you some 10 to 15 minutes to get your concentration back once you've been interrupted? So think about all of that sort of, where do you think your time is going? Dealing with all these things that you don't care about, the customer doesn't care about, and all they do is consume enormous amounts of your time every single day. How many of you walk out at the end of the day and ask yourself, did I get anything done today? And is that like not the worst feeling ever? Transportation, movement of information that doesn't create any value. This is what I call taking paper for a walk. You may as well put a leash on it and walk it around the office. Okay. And you may say, well, we don't do that anymore. We send it electronically. I say, okay, that's better, obviously. But think about this. Think about the growth in your networks. Think about all the additional sort of server space we've had to add, all the memory we've had to add, all the bandwidth we've had to add, all the programs we've had to add, the people to mine the programs, and then the programs that mine the programs. And then people are trying to hack into us and all of that good stuff that goes on every single day. And that process becomes incredibly expensive. And guess what? In government, you get to keep stuff forever, don't you? Right? So people can access it at any time. And that's a huge burden on the organization. Information or inventory sitting in files or queues simply not being worked on. If there's a pile of paper on your desk, okay, ask yourself this question: why did I get this? If I haven't dealt with it right now, why did I get this? And why did I get it now? It's obviously I'm not ready to deal with it, so why isn't the person who sent it to me, why isn't that person connected to me so they know what I need when I need it so I can continue to process this stuff? Okay? And if we're days and days behind, all the more reason why we ought to be looking at what's causing that problem. And in reality, what happens a lot of time is that if I'm supposed to supply you with something, I'll do it when it's convenient to me, not when it's convenient to you. But you're the customer. You're the downstream customer, internal customer. I should be looking at supplying you what you need when you need it. Then things move much more smoothly. Just get a show of hands. How many of you in this room, put up your hand, feel that internally you're treated like a customer? Whoa, nobody. One. Good, we got one at least, thank you. That's not a good thing. You know, if you want to serve the external customer, all you got to do is serve the internal customer first. Okay, and then everything will happen the way it's supposed to. Waiting, idle time when the information needed is unavailable. How much time do you spend waiting? I don't have what I need. I can't do the next step in the process. I can't do my job. And many of you will probably say, well, I don't wait. I just go work on something else. So here's how this works. Okay, I start to do something and I don't have the information that I need. So I make a couple of phone calls, I send an email, and then I put that to one side. Now tomorrow I come back to this, I got to refamiliarize myself with it, still don't have what I need, do a bit more follow-up, and push it to one side. I come back the next day. How many times do you think I come back before I can actually do this? So yes, I'm not sitting there waiting with my feet up on my desk, but I'm doing the same thing over and over and over, and it's not getting done in a timely manner. Processing, steps and transactions the customer doesn't care about, which, by the way, is almost all of them. They don't care about any of this stuff, only we do. Rework and defects, bad information, input errors, and filing errors. If I spend an hour working on a document and I tear it up and I throw it away, does anybody even know that happened? There may not even be any paper. I might do it on a computer screen and then I scrap it. Does anybody even know that happened? How do we know how long it takes to do something? Well, one time I do it, it could take 10 minutes. Another time I do it, it could take 20 minutes. Another time I could do it, it could take half an hour. What's the difference between those things? And I know it's 10 minutes each time, but what's the difference? Well, the difference is something interrupted that process. Okay, something's not working the way it should. I'm having to rework or whatever that happens to be. Motion, searching, filing, sorting, or handling files and information. There's how many copies of the same thing do you think we have sitting in different file cabinets all over the place? Do you know that there's no limit to the amount of stuff you can stuff in a filing cabinet? Do you ever notice that? You can just like keep putting stuff in there. There's a manufacturing company in Talmadge, and the president of that company has said, if you guys need to buy like a piece of equipment that costs $100,000 or whatever, and you can justify it, I'll find a way to get it. But as long as I'm here, nobody in this organization's ever buying a filing cabinet ever again. By the way, the stuff we're putting in the filing cabinet, where's that coming from? The computer somewhere? So we got all these people doing the same things with the same pieces of paper. And then the biggest waste of all is any failure to fully utilize the time and talents of our people. It's the biggest single waste of all. I'm not kidding you when I tell you that you just look around in this room, there's an amazing amount of talent sitting here. How's that talent actually being used? Do we even know what you're good at besides the skills in your job? And you'll find that when we do these problem-solving activities, which I'll explain in a little bit here, right, people have all kinds of talents we don't know anything at all about. I love the way we hire for skill, and we never hire for talent. I know they call it talent acquisition, but that's not what we actually hire for. We hire for skill. So examples of waste, we've talked about some of these, but producing anything that's not needed before it's needed, out of control email systems, making a few more copies just in case. I know a lady that every month she has to make 3 copies for a meeting, and she always makes 8 in case somebody else turns up that they weren't expecting. And of course we throw that away when we're done. Getting thousands of brochures because they're cheaper, we got a deal. By the way, the next time you're in Giant Eagle or wherever you shop and they have milk on sale, right, why don't you buy 50 gallons because you got a deal? Well, of course, the inventory just sits there, it gets spoiled, you throw it out, and all of that stuff. Waiting for a process to end, waiting for information to begin a process. Your call is important to us. God, I hate that phrase. I have a very sort of simple-minded attitude to a lot of stuff. My attitude is if my call was important, you'd answer the darn thing. Taking paper for a walk, transporting data or forms between departments, moving things around the workplace, information in piles and batches not being worked on, office supplies that are in excess of requirements. One of the things we don't do in Lean is we don't go into people's desks, okay? That's just like a no-no. But in one organization, we ask people to voluntarily return any excess office supplies that they had. And that organization didn't have to buy anything for 3 years. And here's what happens. You go to the supply cabinet, you need a pad. Oh, they got pencils, I'll take one of those when I'm here. Oh, they got Post-its, I'll take some of those when I'm here. And what happens is you take that stuff and it triggers the replenishment. It's all sitting in your, you couldn't possibly use it. It's sitting in your desk. So if you don't think that office supplies are expensive, think about what 3 years, Frank, you'd probably be able to tell them, think about what 3 years of that would actually cost you. Extracting information from one software program to put into another. Do we do that? We take information from the computer system and then put it in an Excel spreadsheet? Because we love doing that kind of stuff, don't we? We paid all this money for the computer system and it doesn't give us what we need. Redundant and duplicate databases and the work of maintaining those. Misinformation that causes work that's not required that produces the wrong results. That happens a lot. Didn't quite understand the instruction, or the instruction wasn't clear enough. I got misinformation, and all the work that's done after that is waste. Layout that causes unnecessary movement, we talked about that. Centrally located office equipment that causes excessive motion. And I know we've sort of all looked at this over the years, so we buy one big printer, and now we have everybody walking back and forth to this printer all the time, or a photocopier, right? And by the way, most of the time when you go up there to use it, somebody else is using it. So you go back to your office, and then you come up again, and you go back, and you come up again. Checking somebody else's work, we talked about that. Excessive signatures or approvals, rework or defective work, repetitive information on multiple work documents. Searching for files on your desk work, or how about the searching for files on a network drive? You guys have a network drive, right? How about that? Every so often in my office when I get a chance, okay, I sit down and I clean my desktop, okay, my computer desktop, file stuff away. Feels really good, by the way, because it looks clean and it feels like I got something done. Now tomorrow I need something, and I have no idea where I put it. And then when I do eventually track it down, I have no idea the logic I used to put it in there in the first place. There's an organization in Akron, 100 people, and they did a project that reorganized one of their network drives. This is an accounting firm, okay? This is very complicated. They alphabetized everything. All the A stuff went in the A folder, the B stuff went in the B folder, etc. You know, it's really complicated. Just by doing that one project, they freed up $780,000 of billable hours every year, just by doing that one thing. By being able to find, remember the rule, 10 seconds. By being able to find what they need when they need it. Excessive filing, obsolete files, data entry errors, processing incomplete information, telephone tagging, trying to get hold of somebody, duplicating work done in other departments. And this happens more than we'd like to admit. As things move from one department to another, I don't like the way you did it, so I'm just going to redo it. Excessive meetings or long meetings. And then, of course, the things that we're forced to do by the state government, by the federal government, that have no benefit to us whatsoever, but we'll get into all kinds of trouble if we don't do them. They're what I call the legislated wastes. So all this stuff, folks, that I've just been talking about, and we could talk about it all day, just the waste, consumes 95% of any process. So what I'm saying is, what we're saying when we look at these wastes is that about 5% of any process is value added, and about 95% is opportunity. So let's say your car needs brake repair work done, it's not under warranty, you've been told they're going to charge you $75 an hour to do the work, which I need to change this slide because it's more like 100 and something now. And they start working on your car and you see the following things happening. Every so often the mechanic needs a part, he has to go to the parts department. Sometimes there's a line he has to wait, sometimes he chats with the clerk, and then the clerk gets a call sometimes, and then everybody has to wait. Every so often he needs a tool he doesn't have, and he has to wonder about the repair bay to find one. And then once someone came to him and borrowed a tool after they had a 5-minute chat about football over coffee and a donut. And then speaking of coffee, the mechanic had 6 cups and 3 trips to the restroom. You get to be my age, it's 3 cups. Well, we don't have to talk about that. Do you recognize this or something like this? We've all encountered something like this at some point in time, yes? Let's say we did a waste analysis on the mechanic. We'd probably find after excluding all the non-value added items, he's only using about 50% of his time. We're not even talking about how well he's using that. We're saying he's only using about 50% of his time. But guess what? You have to pay for all of it. And you complain and nobody cares. And after you calm down, you pay the bill and you swear you'll never do business with these people again. And by the way, on the way home, you find grease on the front seat and the brakes still don't work properly. So here's the interesting question. What do you think customers would say if they could see what you do? We're pretty good at seeing this stuff in other people, and we're not that good at seeing it in ourselves. We tend to look at it as some form of criticism. Do not look at this as some form of criticism. This is simply opportunity. So if you rearrange what I just talked about here a moment ago, look what this spells. All this waste is downtime. And of course, if we had downtime, we'd be all over it because it'd be pretty obvious. We're not all over this because it's not obvious at all. In fact, it looks exactly like we expect it to look, which is why we don't do anything about it. So what's involved in implementing Lean? Well, there's 5 core principles of Lean. They are specify value from the customer's perspective, identify the value stream for each process or each service that we offer, create flow, make sure that things flow from one step to the next with no delay, and only flow at the pull or the demand of the next downstream step in the process, and then pursue perfection. Am I better today than I was yesterday? There are 4 rules of Lean. The first one of these is standard work or standardized work. What is that? There's a defined way to do the job, and everybody who does the job that way every time the job is done. Sounds fairly straightforward, does it not? Now ask yourself, then why don't we do that? I know why we don't do it, because it's boring. In fact, what people say is, hey, you're stopping me from being creative, you're putting me in a box. So then how on the one hand, and I've just been talking about this, how on the one hand do you say, and I've just said it, on the one hand, hey, we need our people to be creative, and then on the other hand, here's how the job is done, that's the only way to do it. Well, what you do is you tell people, look, you have a voice, but you don't have a choice. The voice is the creativity, and the voice is used to create the best possible standard work. But once that standard work is in place, you follow it. And you follow it every single time. You've probably got some phenomenal examples of what I'm talking about in the police department, the fire department, et cetera, et cetera. They're pretty used to this, been used to this for a long time. Why do they use it? Because it works. So you have to really enforce this whole thing. If you don't have standard work and you don't follow standard work, you're going to get a lot of problems that you can't explain. And by the way, those problems will probably keep repeating until we go in and solve the root cause. Limit material or information movement, limit people movement, and then educate everybody in the organization. It's pretty impressive that the city has chosen to ask everybody to be here today, because I can assure you that there's the level of success with Lean correlates directly to the level of education you have about it. And all we're doing today is an overview. We're doing all of this, I understand, at a very high level, but at least you'll understand what this is all about, hopefully, by the time you leave here today. Questions start to arise when people don't understand it, when they start to hear the rumors about it, and they start to misinterpret what it's about, etc. And then there's a whole series of tools that we literally do not have time to go into here today, but they're all out there. So Lean tools help us to see clearly, make today's work visible, make the process visible, make the status visible, make the waste visible, make the target clear, and then make it clear what we're doing to get rid of the waste. And again, you can look at the detail of that when you get a moment. But a big part of Lean is make the work visible. What's actually going on right now? Where are we at? Are we on track? Are we not on track? How do we stop ourselves from getting behind? When do we need to pull in help? And when do we not? So what's the strategy? Well, the strategy for Lean is continuous improvement through this process known as Kaizen. Okay? And Kaizen means change for the better. Break it apart, make it better. Continuous improvement. There's all kinds of translations out there about it. But what is a Kaizen? A Kaizen is a problem-solving activity. They call it a rapid improvement event. So how does this thing work? Well, what happens is that Monday morning, a team has been given a very specific problem to solve. By Friday afternoon, they're supposed to have solved the problem, already implemented the solution, and reported out to management. All of that's supposed to happen in 1 week. The objective here is to have a new process the following Monday morning. So this team is cross-functional. Okay? So about a third of the people on the team, approximately a third, are from the area where the problem resides. About a third are from areas that are affected by the problem, and about a third are people who don't know anything at all about the problem. Who do you think tends to solve the problem? The people who don't know anything about it. Why? Because they don't see it from the same perspective that you do. They'll ask the so-called dumb questions. Why on earth do you do that? Or why do you do it this way? That's a very powerful thing, is to have those fresh sets of eyes in that problem-solving activity. It's a pretty intense week. Typically, the team is 6 to 8 people, and you think that a week is a long time. Believe me, it's over before you know it. But the objective is put a new process in place during the Kaizen event. That's why they call it a rapid improvement event. Now, what typically happens when we have a team trying to solve a problem? Well, we meet every week for 6 months, and then it fizzles out, and nothing really changes. I had somebody say to me, a president of a company say to me recently, he said, I've had a team of people working on a problem for 6 months, and they were getting nowhere. I put a Kaizen team together, and they solved it in 1 week. So what's the goal in the Kaizen event? Clearly specify all activities, content, what's being done, and in what order. How long should it take, the timing, the outcome, what clearly defined measurable results are expected. Clearly define all connections to every customer and supplier. By the way, these are internal and external customers and suppliers. No ambiguity, direct with no intermediary in between. Yes or no answers, eliminate the maybes, the gray areas. Clearly define all pathways, simple with as few steps and people as possible. Direct steps to deliver the requested product or service with standardized work in place. And then continuously improve. Direct response to any problem that arises by those people doing the work, as close to the work as possible, and then experiment and coach. And again, the whole philosophy of Lean is to move from the traditional style of management to the coaching style of management. Our objective is to make every single employee a problem solver. So here's what happens. We start off by mapping things as they are. We map out the process. Here's how it works. We measure, eliminate the waste, flow value-added activities, and train people in the new process. Measure again to make sure that what we're saying is real, and then celebrate the accomplishments. Why do we want to celebrate the accomplishments? Because it's a big deal. When we ask employees to go off and solve a problem on behalf of the organization, and they do, that's a big deal. We need to make sure that people understand how appreciated that actually is. Recognition fuels involvement, that fuels engagement. You know, the 2 most powerful words in the English language are thank you. When was the last time you heard it? Or good job, or whatever way somebody would say that. And then how do you feel when somebody says that to you? Do you throw your hands up in the air and say, my life is now complete, I never have to do anything ever again? Or do you turn around and do it again so you can hear it again? They're simple words, and if they're genuinely spoken, they're the most powerful thing that you could ever possibly hear. So we start off with Lean by doing big projects, okay? That's kind of how this works. After a while, they become small projects, and after a while, they become even smaller projects. You've got to move from this thing we call project focus to habitual behavior to the way we do things around here. So what's required from the people in the organization? You know, a government organization is simply a collection of people working together to provide a product or a service. Think about what this place would look like if there were no people in it. All it is buildings. All it is cubicles. All it is computer terminals. It doesn't come to life until you put people in it. So to have a lean government, you have to have lean people. People have to get lean before the organization can get lean. That means they have to think lean. So if you take a goldfish and you put it in a bowl, it'll grow to 1 to 2 inches. If you put it in a tank, it'll grow to 2 to 6 inches. If you put it in a pond, it'll grow 12 inches or more. So as you head into looking at this thing called lean, you got to ask yourself a couple of questions. And how you answer these 2 questions will determine how successful you will be. Do we keep our people in a confined environment because we see it as inefficient and wasteful to put them in a larger environment? Or do we provide our people with a larger environment because we see it as ineffective and wasteful of their potential to keep them in a confined environment? How you answer those questions will determine how successful you'll be. And as I mentioned to you earlier on, lean is all about respecting people. What's involved in that? You got to acknowledge their talents and their skills. Okay? We have a lot of people who've been doing the job for a long time. We ought to value that. We have people who haven't been here very long. We ought to value that too. Okay? They provide that different perspective. Find the right fit between talent and role. Do we have the right people in the right jobs? Show your trust in their ability to get the job done and contribute to improving organization performance. These days, we tend not to trust people at all. We tend to micromanage people. You should never micromanage people. You should always have people micromanage the detail, because that's where all the money is. Trust your people to get the job done. They'll get it done. You need to show that you care. They have to believe it. And we define caring as setting people up for success, creating the environment in which people can be everything that they choose to be. Show them that you value them as individuals and that you value their work and recognize the achievements. And then the highest form of respect that you can show anybody is to continually challenge that individual. I need your help, more input, more thought. You know, I told you earlier on that the 2 most powerful words in the English language are thank you. The second 2 most powerful words in the English language are help me. When we go ask people for help, we're showing that we respect them. So to wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about institutionalizing lean. Why would I want to do that? Because we spend years institutionalizing the way we do things today. So despite the fact that we're trying to change the way we do things around here, lean needs to become the way we do things around here. So what's involved with that? Well, again, real quick here, management, education, and commitment, followed by engagement. Commitment puts you in this room today. Engagement means being involved, right? Setting challenges for people, helping people solve problems, showing interest in the outcome of the Kaizen events, et cetera, et cetera. And a must-win attitude. What happens if we don't go down this path, folks? What happens if revenue continues to get squeezed and cost continues to go up? What happens? Well, it's not very pleasant. Let's just leave it at that. Okay? And that's what we've been battling for some years now. Do you think the state government's ready to give you an extra few million every year? Doesn't sound like it, does it? Management must clearly communicate the plan, the reason for it, and to the extent possible outline the future following implementation. Frank talked to you about why you're in this room this morning. We've got to make people understand what this thing is, why we're doing this, what we think this thing is going to look like when we get a few years down the road. So people have a vision for what this thing called lean is actually going to do for the organization. Educate everybody, we talked about that. If you're going to do lean, right? Don't tinker with it, don't play with it, either go at it whole hog or don't go at it at all. And a real culture change has to take place. And I love the way people talk about culture change. It's like, yeah, we'll get that old culture thing done by Friday. It's taken us years to build the culture we have. It's going to take years to change the culture. And the way you change the culture is through consistency and persistency. The message doesn't change. Here's the path that we're on. And get some early successes so that when people say this won't work here, you can say it already has. Give people some authority to make changes. If you don't give people power, they simply will take it. Have you ever heard anybody say, I'm the only one around here who knows how to do this? You ever heard that expression? Believe me when I tell you that's by design. People taking that power. Okay? By the way, don't feel bad about this. All of us humans have this same need. We have to have power. Don't worry about it. It's just inherent in us. So how about rather than have people take the power, we vest the power in people? Deal with the concrete heads, the butt heads, and the beekeepers. Concrete heads, we have people in the organization who, when management decides to do something, they just choose not to. They're special, they got the memo. By the way, they resist every change. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay, good or bad, they're against it. The butt heads are people who have but at the end of every sentence. Oh, this is a great idea, but now is not the time. Or, but we don't have the money. Or we don't have the resource. They're not going to do anything. And the beekeepers are simply the people who spend the majority of their time blowing smoke. Okay? And they're not going to do anything either. All that happens is when we don't deal with this, they get in the way of getting really good things done in the organization. Stay focused and understand the transition phases. Early in Lean, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. We can get a lot of things done, fairly major projects, and it's kind of exciting. But very quickly, that settles down into these much smaller improvement activities, which, by the way, where's all the money is and all the real improvements are. Avoid backsliding. There is no message more destructive. You put a team of people to work on a project, okay, and they do it, and 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, nobody's doing it, and it's gone right back to the way it was before. How depressing is that? By the way, when you let that happen, the message that you're sending out to the organization is, we don't care. It becomes what's known as the flavor of the month. How many of you have seen every flavor of the month come and go? To me, the flavor of the month equals, right, backsliding equals the flavor of the month. You let that thing go back to the way it was before, we just wasted the time of everybody that was in that room. Apply these tools, lean tools, to the whole organization and recognize small improvements. Somebody comes to you with a $5 cost reduction idea. Do you have time for that? You probably say, yes, I do. But in reality, we probably say, right? You don't know that there isn't a $10,000 cost reduction idea right behind it. And by the way, if you don't want the $5 cost reduction ideas, I'll leave you my address. You can just send them to me. I'll take them. Every penny, every dollar, every $5, $10, $10,000, it doesn't matter. What we're doing is we're getting people involved, and the city, the organization benefits from it. There ought to be no embarrassment or retribution for admitting problems. Does anybody in this room think we don't have problems? Then why are we afraid to talk about them? Did you ever hear the expression, why did you bring that up in front of my boss? We ought to reward, right, people for bringing up problems. If we don't know what they are, how do we fix them? There's not a criticism involved in that. It just simply is. Okay? If we have issues, how about we just deal with them? Be innovative, be creative, share best practices. You know, I talk about best practices, best practice for the time being. We do something really well over here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel over here for right now. Let's just do the same thing. And then focus on the fundamentals every day. If you take the great sports teams that are out there, like the Browns, that usually gets a laugh. One of these days I'm going to say that and it will actually mean something. But if you take the truly great sports teams that are out there, what do they do really well? The fundamentals, okay? Once the game is over, they come back, they practice it, they practice it, they practice it. In Lean, fundamentals are standard work, workplace organization, visual management, etc. When those things are done really well, you don't have to solve problems, they just go away, okay? So focus on those fundamentals every single day. And then work ought to be fun. Do you know we spend more time at work than we do almost any other activity in our lives, including sleeping? You think it ought to be fun? And if it's not fun, what's wrong with that picture? We start to get people involved in this stuff, start to get people coming up with ideas, we start to implement some improvements, we start to have success, and we get recognition for all of that. This is a fun thing to do for most people. You'll find that most people who've participated in this really like it.